Can you imagine driving a truck while looking at the road through the floor? That's exactly what International Harvester did with one of its strangest and most revolutionary models, the Sideline. A design so ahead of its time and so unusual that it seemed like science fiction, but in reality, it was created for a very practical reason. Today we're going to find out why this truck ended up as a forgotten oddity and what made it so different from anything else on the road. Let's get started. The battle against the measuring tape. Let's go back to the United States in the 1950s. At that time, traffic laws were pretty strict regarding the total length allowed for trucks. The maximum was 50 feet for the entire unit, truck plus trailer. And that included everything from the front bumper to the last wheel of the trailer. Today, just to give you an idea, the trailer alone can be up to 53 feet long. So, trucking companies had a problem. The longer the truck cab, the less space there was left for the trailer. The solution? Shorter cabs. And this is where International comes in with a bold proposal. Move the driver over the engine and shrink the cab down to just 48 inches long. Yes, just 1.2 meters. Shorter than a couch. Comfort. That would come later. Limited visibility. Extreme solutions. You'd think that if you were already going to put the driver practically on top of the engine, at the very least you give them good visibility. But most cab-over-engine trucks, the famous cab-overs of the era, still kept a small hood. This not only took up space, but also created a huge blind spot in front. In chaotic cities like Chicago, people learned to live with it. In fact, pedestrians would often raise their arms, or even umbrellas, when crossing in front of these trucks, just to make sure the driver saw them. And if you've ever noticed those bars sticking out from the front of modern school buses, now you know where the idea comes from, to prevent anyone from being hidden in that blind spot. International Harvester said, what if we just cut off the front and give the driver a windshield? At their feet, the Sideliner is born. This is how the Sideliner came about. At first glance, it looked like a regular International truck, but with one big difference. Beneath the traditional windshield, there was a second set of windows, right at the driver's knee level. The idea was clear: to give a complete, unobstructed view of the road, even right in front of the truck. A radical innovation, no doubt. But like everything in life, when you solve one problem, sometimes you open Pandora's box, when the sun shows no mercy. The design of the Sidewinder was futuristic, but it had its drawbacks. Imagine being in a cockpit completely surrounded by glass on a sunny day, with no modern air conditioning, no tinted windows. Just you, the sun, and your knees getting roasted. Drivers complained that the heat was unbearable. Literally, some people ended up with burns if they wore shorts. The cabin would turn into a greenhouse on wheels. And that wasn't all. The night had its own challenges too. During the nighttime hours, those same windows that were so useful became a nightmare. The headlights of oncoming cars would bounce off the lower panes and shine directly into the driver's eyes. Imagine driving all night with constant flashes of white light coming in from below the steering wheel. Not just uncomfortable, dangerous. The solution for many: covering the windows. Some used metal sheets, others just painted over them. Goodbye to the extra visibility. Goodbye to the innovative concept. Fragile windows and thieves. And as if that weren't enough, those windows were more exposed than they should have been. rocks thrown up by the tires of other vehicles were deadly for the lower windows. And of course, thieves also saw their chance. Breaking the lower glass was easier than forcing a door. The sideline became a frequent target for theft. So between the heat, the glare, the constant breakages, and the thefts, the driver was no longer so excited about the innovation, a model that didn't last long. The International Sideliner was manufactured between 1957 and 1962, just a short 5 years that were enough to leave a mark, but not enough to conquer the market. Nowadays, finding one in good condition and without modifications is almost mission impossible. Most were altered by their owners to cover up design flaws, and many simply didn't survive the passage of time. Why didn't it work? Although the Sideliner solved real problems, like length restrictions and front visibility, it introduced others that turned out to be more troublesome than expected. Truck drivers, who already had a tough job, weren't willing to deal with sunburns, night blindness, broken windows, or frequent thefts. Sometimes, a solution that's too far ahead of its time can be worse than the original problem. And that's exactly what happened with the Sideliners. But you have to acknowledge the effort. Despite its flaws, the Sideliner is proof of the creativity and ingenuity that sometimes hides in the most unexpected corners of transportation history. It was a bold attempt to rethink truck design from the ground up. And even though it failed, it laid the groundwork for new ideas. Every technical advancement we see today, from safer cabs to better visibility systems, has its roots in these experiments from the past. And if you want to see one, although they're rare, there are still some surviving Sideliners out there. And if you ever come across one, don't look at it as some ridiculous relic. See it for what it was: a bold gamble, an attempt to break the rules, and a unique piece of history on wheels. In fact, if you're really curious, there's a forgotten Sideliner sitting in a yard in Ponder, Idaho. It belongs to Old Noim. Tell him a truck enthusiast sent you. Or don't say anything at all. Just look at it, touch the cab, and imagine what it was like to be inside, sweating under the sun or cursing at other drivers' headlights. That's history too. So, tell me, what's the weirdest truck design you've ever seen? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, give it a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Because here, we don't just talk about engines. We talk about crazy ideas, epic fails, and the machines that, even if just for a moment, tried to change everything.